Admiral Kovacs stood before the Meridian Alliance Council, her crystalline appendages dulled with exhaustion. The holographic displays behind her showed the devastating progress of the swarm's advance through Alliance space, a sea of red indicators consuming the blue territories of civilized space. "Counselors," she began, her translator struggling to convey the depth of her resignation. "In the past solar cycle alone, we've lost contact with 17 more colony worlds. The swarm's biological ships have evolved beyond our ability to track them. They're adapting faster than our predictive algorithms can process." The council chamber, carved from a single massive asteroid deep in neutral space, fell silent. Representatives from 32 spacefaring civilizations, from the gaseous Etheri to the silicon-based Hexatl, all processed the implications. The swarm, a hostile collective of bioengineered weapons that had broken free from their ancient creators, was proving unstoppable. "The mathematic Concordat's latest projections give us less than 6 cycles before total societal collapse," Kovacs continued. "Our unified technological advantage, the very foundation of our civilization, has become our greatest weakness. The swarm learns from every engagement, adapting to and ultimately surpassing our standardized combat protocols." Councillor Helix, her crystalline form glowing a deep indigo of concern, raised an appendage. "What of the rumored discovery in Sector 47? The primitive world our deep space sensors detected." Kovacs' own crystals flickered with a mix of hope and skepticism. "Earth, a Class 3 civilization we've been observing. They're different." She manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up images of a blue-green world circling an unremarkable yellow star. "Different how?" The Etheri representative swirled with curiosity, their gaseous form creating complex patterns. "They're chaotic, unpredictable. Their development path defies all known sociological models. Look at this." Kovacs displayed a series of images showing Earth's military history. While we evolved toward technological uniformity and efficiency, they maintained thousands of different combat doctrines simultaneously. Their military technology isn't superior, it's deliberately diverse, inconsistent, redundant. The council erupted in dismissive chatter. Inefficiency was considered the highest form of cultural failing among Alliance species, but Kovacs pressed on. 2 solar cycles ago, we secretly supplied a small group of human military advisors with Alliance technology to gauge their potential. The results were unprecedented. She played a recording of a recent skirmish. A single retrofitted human vessel, barely a quarter the size of a standard Alliance cruiser, engaged 3 swarm bioships using tactics that made several council members recoil in horror. The human ship deliberately vented plasma from apparent battle damage, creating a debris field that confused the swarm's biological sensors. Instead of maintaining optimal firing solutions as Alliance doctrine demanded, it maneuvered erratically, almost randomly. When the swarm ships adapted to its weapon frequencies, the humans responded not by increasing power or efficiency, but by manually detuning their weapons to create unpredictable energy patterns. "They won," Kovacs stated simply, "not through superior technology or precise calculation, but through what they call improvisation. Their minds work differently than ours. They don't seek perfect solutions, they embrace chaos as a strategy." Councillor Helix's crystalline form vibrated with distress. "You're suggesting we pin the survival of galactic civilization on primitives who haven't even achieved unified planetary governance." "I'm suggesting," Kovacs replied carefully, "that our enemy's greatest strength is its ability to adapt to logical, predictable responses. Humanity's greatest strength appears to be its resistance to standardization. They don't just tolerate chaos, they weaponize it." She displayed more data, thousands of human combat simulations, each showing different approaches to the same tactical problems. Their military history is filled with examples of inferior forces defeating superior ones through unconventional thinking. They have a concept they call asymmetric warfare the art of turning an enemy's strengths into weaknesses. The Zextal representative's silicon matrices pulsed with calculation patterns, the statistical improbability of success through random action. That's just it, Kvex interrupted. Their actions aren't random. They're intuitive. They operate on what they call gut instinct, a form of rapid pattern recognition that bypasses logical analysis. The swarm's adaptive algorithms can't predict what the humans themselves don't plan. She played one final recording, a human commander's report after their first encounter with the swarm. The alien council members watched in fascination as the human explained how they had identified behavioral patterns in the bioships that the Alliance's advanced AI had missed, not through data analysis, but through what they called hunter's instinct. The humans have a saying, Kvex concluded. They talk about thinking outside the box. Their entire species seems to operate outside any box we've ever constructed. Yes, they're primitive by our standards. Yes, their society is chaotic and their methods inefficient. But right now, those traits might be exactly what we need. The council chamber erupted in debate. The idea of relying on an underdeveloped species violated centuries of Alliance doctrine. But as the holographic displays continued to show the inexorable advance of the swarm, Kvex could see the first hints of acceptance in her fellow council members. She activated one final simulation, a projection showing human tactical doctrines integrated with Alliance technology. The result was unlike anything the Council had ever seen, a hybrid approach that combined advanced technology with unpredictable implementation. The simulation showed swarm adaptation algorithms failing to cope with the randomized patterns. "We have a choice," Kvex declared. "We can maintain our commitment to logic and efficiency and watch our civilization fall to an enemy that outmatches us at our own game. Or we can embrace an alliance with a species that breaks all our rules and perhaps find a new path to victory." The Council's deliberations lasted for 3 full rotations. In the end, necessity overcame tradition. The vote was passed. Humanity would be contacted and offered full Alliance membership, with all the technological benefits it entailed. In return, they would be asked to help lead the fight against the swarm. As Kvex prepared the first official contact mission to Earth, she reflected on another human saying she had learned: desperate times call for desperate measures. The next few cycles would prove just how desperate and just how unconventional the path to survival would become. The fate of the galaxy now rested not on finding the perfect solution, but on embracing imperfection as a strategy. Humanity's chaotic nature, long seen as a sign of their primitiveness, might just prove to be the ultimate weapon against an enemy that had mastered the art of adaptation. The real question was, could the Alliance itself adapt enough to embrace such a radical change in approach? Kvex's crystals pulsed with determined purpose as she set course for Earth. The next phase of galactic history was about to begin, and it would be anything but predictable. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the massive observation bay of the Alliance flagship Eternal Logic, watching Earth ships arrive through the Quantum Gate network. Each vessel was different, a violation of every Alliance design principle that made her new alien colleagues visibly uncomfortable. Retrofitted cargo holders bristled with improvised weapons alongside sleek destroyers and cobbled together hybrid craft that defied classification. "Your species' lack of standardization remains disturbing," commented senior strategist Angstol, his crystalline, form-shifting colors with barely contained distress. "How do you maintain supply chains, repair protocols, basic tactical cohesion?" Sarah smiled, remembering her first weeks working with the Alliance military. "We adapt. Every ship captain knows their vessel's quirks. Every engineer learns to improvise. It's not efficient, but..." "It's brilliant," interrupted Dr. Yara Pavtel, striding onto the observation deck with her usual intensity. The quantum physicist's hair was wild, her lab coat covered in equations written in marker. "Don't you see, Angstol? The swarm's primary advantage is their predictive adaptation. They analyze patterns and develop countermeasures. But how do you counter an enemy with no pattern? The Alliance officers' crystals pulsed with skepticism. The mathematic concordats analysis suggests. Math can't predict chaos. Yara cut in, pulling up holographic displays. Look at this morning's engagement. The swarm encountered 3 different human ship designs. Each one used different frequencies, different tactical approaches. By the time they adapted to one, they faced something completely new. They can't develop a unified counter strategy because there's nothing unified to counter. Sarah watched the replay, pride swelling as she saw human ingenuity in action. A converted mining vessel had used its mineral scanning arrays to detect weakness in swarm bioarmor. A research ship had reconfigured its atmospheric sampling tools into a weapon that disrupted the enemy's biological processes. Each solution was unique, unexpected. We're seeing similar results in the joint training exercises, Sarah added. When we mix human crews with Alliance technology, both sides learn to think differently. Your people are learning to improvise, while we're learning to harness your advanced systems in ways you never considered. The observation deck fell silent as a massive shape emerged from the quantum gate. The USS Prometheus, Earth's first true hybrid vessel. Built on an Alliance framework but modified with human innovations, it represented everything unconventional about their partnership. Its hull was deliberately asymmetrical, its weapon systems purposefully varied. The ship's very existence violated a dozen Alliance design principles. The swarm won't know what to make of her, Sarah said softly. Neither do we, really, that's the point. Engstol's crystalline form flickered with complex emotions. Your species embraces uncertainty. It goes against everything we believe, everything we've built our civilization upon. And yet, he gestured at another holographic display showing the swarm's recent retreat from 3 star systems. Results cannot be denied. Dr. Patel was already scribbling new equations on her tablet. We're just getting started. My team is working on combining Alliance quantum field technology with human chaos theory. Imagine weapons that don't just behave unpredictably, but actually exist in a state of quantum uncertainty until the moment of impact. Speaking of uncertainty, Sarah said, checking her communicator, the first Joint Strike Team is ready for inspection, shall we? They made their way to the training deck, where 30 humans and an equal number of Alliance species waited in formation. The sight would have been unthinkable months ago. Crystalline Helixians standing alongside humans, gaseous ethery contained in modified combat suits, even a silicon-based Hexatl integrated into a human-designed battle platform. Report, Sarah ordered. A young lieutenant stepped forward. Ma'am, the team has completed the randomized scenario trials. Alliance members showed a 47% improvement in adaptive response times. Human personnel demonstrated a 53% increase in tactical precision. When operating as mixed units, overall combat effectiveness increased by 89%. Engstol's crystals pulsed with surprise. How is such improvement possible? The integration protocols alone should have reduced efficiency by at least 40%. Because we're not just combining our methods, Sarah explained. We're developing entirely new ones. The Alliance troops are teaching us the value of precision and coordination. We're teaching them to trust their instincts, to embrace controlled chaos. Dr. Patel pulled up more data on her tablet. The psychological impact on the swarm has been even more dramatic. Their entire strategy relies on identifying and countering patterns. Against our hybrid forces, they're encountering something they've never faced, an enemy that becomes less predictable the more organized it becomes. Our alarm sounded, not the harsh blare of combat stations, the subtle tone indicating new tactical data. Sarah pulled up the feed on the main display. The Prometheus had engaged a swarm scout force in the outer system. The hybrid ship's performance was beyond anything they'd hoped for. Alliance quantum weapons fired in random sequences, while human-designed countermeasures created false signatures that confused the swarm's biosensors. When the enemy adapted to energy weapons, the Prometheus launched modified mining drones that bored through bioarmor. When they adjusted to that, the ship vented plasma in a pattern based on Earth weather systems, creating a chaotic electromagnetic storm that the swarm's predictive algorithms couldn't navigate. Beautiful, Dr. Patel whispered. They can't adapt because there's no single strategy to adapt to. Every engagement is unique, every solution improvised. Sarah watched the swarm ships retreat in disarray. This is just the beginning. We need to scale up these hybrid operations, create entire fleets that operate on these principles. Engstol's crystalline form had shifted to a deep blue of contemplation. The Alliance Council will resist. Change does not come easily to species who have built their civilizations on order and logic. Then we'll have to show them that controlled chaos isn't just a tactical advantage, Sarah replied. It's the key to survival. The swarm embodies perfect adaptation to known patterns. We need to become the unknown, not just in our technology, but in our very way of thinking. She turned to address the assembled strike team. Each of you represents something unprecedented, the combination of Alliance precision and human unpredictability. Together, we're not just fighting the swarm, we're evolving beyond anything they can predict or counter. As she spoke, more Earth ships emerged from the quantum gate, each one unique, each one a puzzle the enemy would have to solve anew. The Prometheus moved into formation with Alliance vessels, its asymmetric profile a symbol of their new hybrid approach to warfare. The real test is still coming, Dr. Patel warned, her eyes on the tactical displays. The swarm will launch a major offensive soon. They must know we're onto something here. Sarah nodded grimly. Let them come. Every engagement teaches us too, not just about their capabilities, but about our own potential. Humanity has spent its entire history adapting, improvising, finding unexpected solutions. Now we're teaching those skills to the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. She watched as human and Alliance crews moved with growing confidence through their joint exercises. Two radically different approaches to warfare were merging into something entirely new, something that might just save them all. The next battle would prove whether their hybrid strategy could work on a larger scale. But as Sarah looked at the diverse collection of ships and species before her, she felt a surge of hope. The galaxy's greatest strength had always been its diversity. They were just finally learning how to use it. The battle bridge of the US Prometheus shuddered as another swarm tendril sliced through space, this one adapting to even their most chaotic defense patterns. Captain Sarah Chen watched her tactical display with growing concern as the massive bioships began exhibiting behaviors they'd never seen before. They're learning, Dr. Patel announced grimly from her makeshift science station, surrounded by holographic equations that shifted faster than most eyes could follow. Not just adapting, actually learning. These aren't the mechanical responses we've seen before. The Prometheus rocked again as a biobeam pierced their quantum-shifted shields. Sarah's hybrid crew, human and alien alike, worked with desperate efficiency to reroute power and modify their defenses. Through the main viewport, she could see the Alliance fleet fragmenting under the newfound precision of the swarm's assault. All ships, implement Protocol Thunderstorm, Sarah broadcast across the fleet channels. It was their newest tactic, deliberately introducing controlled equipment failures to create truly random energy signatures. A dangerous gambit, but predictability meant death against this evolved enemy. Senior strategist Angstol's crystalline form pulsed with urgent patterns. Captain, the swarm's targeting algorithms, they're mimicking human unpredictability. Impossible by all known behavioral models, but they're not just countering our chaos, Dr. Patel interrupted, her hands flying over her console. They're weaponizing it, using our own strategic randomness against us. The question is how. The science officer's statement was cut short as a massive bioship emerged from quantum space directly ahead of them. But this one was different. Its organic hull was studded with crystalline growths that bore an unsettling resemblance to Helixian architecture. Parts of its biological weapons seemed to incorporate Alliance technology, while other sections moved with an almost human irregularity. By the void, Engstol whispered, his crystal matrix nearly white with shock. They've been analyzing both of us. Not just our tactics, our very nature. Sarah's mind raced as she watched the hybrid bioship launch attacks that combined swarm biological weapons with Alliance quantum technology. All ships fall back to secondary positions. New formation pattern Alpha 7 random. Do not, I repeat, do not maintain any consistent response pattern. The fleet struggled to regroup, but the enemy's new capabilities were devastating. A Helixian cruiser shattered as BO beams struck it in precisely the right crystalline stress points. An Ethery vessel's gaseous crew was dispersed when the swarm somehow replicated their own atmospheric containment technology against them. Dr. Petal, Sarah called out, I need options. The physicist had torn off her lab coat, using it to wipe away equations only to scribble new ones. The swarm's adaptation isn't just technological, it's fundamental. They're incorporating the basic nature of every species they encounter. The crystalline structure, the gaseous weapons, the human unpredictability. They're becoming a composite of everything they fight. Sarah watched as another Alliance ship fell to the enemy's evolved arsenal. Then we need to give them something they can't incorporate. Something so fundamental it defies their ability to adapt. That's it. Dr. Patel's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. Captain, remember our quantum uncertainty weapon tests? The ones that failed because they were too unpredictable even for us. The ones that nearly blew up the lab. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Hard to forget. What if that's exactly what we need? The physicist was already reconfiguring her station. The swarm can adapt to chaos they can analyze, but what about chaos that's fundamentally impossible to predict? True quantum uncertainty at a macro scale. Engstol's crystals shifted to a deep purple of concern. The energy requirements would be astronomical, and the risk. It's better than certain defeat, Sarah finished. She keyed her fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Captain Chen. Begin emergency power transfer to the Prometheus. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. As the Allied fleet channeled power to her ship, Sarah watched the hybrid bioship approaching. Its surface rippled with stolen technologies, each adaptation making it stronger. But in its very perfection of adaptation lay a potential weakness. Theory suggests, Dr. Patel explained as she worked, that the swarm's ability to adapt requires them to observe and analyze. But quantum uncertainty in its purest form cannot be analyzed. The very act of observation affects the outcome. If we can generate a large enough field of quantum uncertainty, they won't be able to adapt to what they can't predict, Sarah finished, because there won't be anything concrete to adapt to. Engstol, can you get any firing solutions? The crystalline officer's form flickered with calculations. Conventional targeting is impossible with this level of quantum flux. We would be as likely to hit ourselves as the enemy. Perfect. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. That's exactly what we need. Dr. Patel, how long until you can generate the field? Field. The physicist looked up from her calculations with a manic grin. Captain, I'm not talking about generating a field. I'm talking about turning the Prometheus itself into a quantum uncertainty engine. The entire ship will exist in a state of quantum flux. Every weapon, every system, even our physical location in space-time. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The crew. We'll be fine. Probably. Classical physics still applies at the biological level. Mostly. Dr. Patel's confidence wasn't entirely reassuring. But the ship's interactions with space-time will become fundamentally unpredictable. Not random, truly, mathematically uncertain. Sarah looked at her hybrid crew, humans working alongside crystalline beings and gaseous entities, all of them unified in purpose despite their radical differences. They had already achieved what most thought impossible. Perhaps it was time to push even further beyond the possible. Do it, she ordered. The next few minutes were a blur of activity as Dr. Patel's modifications took hold. The Prometheus's hull began to shimmer as quantum uncertainty crept through its systems. Weapons fired at random intervals, shield harmonics shifted between infinite possibilities, and reality itself seemed to blur around them. The swarm's hybrid ship moved in for the kill, its weapons primed with stolen knowledge from a dozen species. But as it engaged the quantum-uncertain Prometheus, something extraordinary happened. Every attempt to analyze and adapt failed because there was nothing concrete to adapt to. The very act of observing the Prometheus changed what it was observing. "It's working," Dr. Potel shouted over the weird harmonics now pervading the bridge. Their adaptation protocols are caught in an infinite loop. They can't predict what we'll do because we don't even know what we'll do. Sarah watched in amazement as the massive bioship recoiled from the quantum chaos emanating from her vessel. The stolen technologies on its hull began to malfunction as they tried, and failed to compensate for something that defied compensation. "All ships," she broadcast, her voice steady despite the uncertainty field making her very words probabilistic, "target the hybrid vessel. Don't worry about coordination. The more random our attack pattern, the better." The Ally fleet opened fire, their attacks made unpredictable by the quantum interference spreading from the Prometheus. The swarm vessel, for the first time, found itself truly unable to adapt. Its stolen technologies, its evolved weapons, its very nature as the perfect adaptive entity, all became weaknesses as it tried to counter an attack that existed in all possible states simultaneously. In the end, it wasn't a single killing blow that destroyed the massive bioship. Reality itself seemed to unravel around it as quantum uncertainty undermined its every attempt at adaptation. The vessel imploded, taking its revolutionary but ultimately flawed evolution with it. As the quantum field slowly stabilized, Sarah looked at her displays with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The remaining swarm ships were retreating, their adaptive protocols thoroughly disrupted by what they'd witnessed. "Well," Dr. Patel said, already scribbling new equations, "that was interesting." Interesting. Engstol's crystalline form had shifted to a color none of them had seen before. "We just weaponized uncertainty itself. We made unpredictability into a fundamental force of combat." Sarah nodded slowly, watching the swarms retreat. "And we learned something crucial about them. They can adapt to anything they can analyze, even chaos itself. But true uncertainty, that's something even their perfect adaptation can't handle." "Because perfect adaptation requires perfect understanding," Dr. Patel finished. "And some things in this universe simply cannot be perfectly understood." As damage reports began flowing in and the fleet regrouped, Sarah felt a new sense of purpose. They had found not just a weapon against the swarm, but a fundamental truth about the nature of their enemy. The perfect adapter had encountered the ultimately unadaptable. The war was far from over, but they had discovered something profound. Sometimes the best defense against an enemy that could learn everything was to become something that couldn't be learned at all. Deep within the repurposed asteroid that now served as Joint Command, the largest holographic chamber in Alliance space hummed with activity. The massive spherical room displayed a real-time representation of the ongoing war, with swarm movements marked in pulsing red and allied forces in shifting blues and greens. But it was the purple zones, areas of implemented quantum uncertainty, that drew everyone's attention. Admiral Sarah Chen, newly promoted after the Prometheus incident, stood before the assembled War Council. Representatives from every allied species attended both in person and via quantum projection, their diverse forms creating a living testament to galactic diversity. "The quantum uncertainty protocol was just the beginning," she explained, manipulating the holographic display to show their latest innovations. "Once we understood that the swarm's perfect adaptation was also their perfect weakness, everything changed." Dr. Petal, now heading the Joint Species Innovation Division, stepped forward. Her old lab coat had been replaced by a formal uniform, though it was already covered in handwritten equations. "We've developed what we call consciousness bombs. weapons that create localized fields of quantum superposition. When detonated, they force everything within their radius into a state of quantum uncertainty. Asextile representative silicon matrices pulsed with calculation patterns. The energy requirements are massive, Dr. Potel acknowledged. But we found a solution there too, thanks to our ethery colleagues. She nodded to the gaseous beings voting in their containment suits. Their natural state of matter exists partially in quantum flux. We've learned to harness that property to power our uncertainty drives. The holographic display shifted to show footage from recent battles. Alliance ships now moved in seemingly impossible ways, their quantum-enhanced drives allowing them to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The swarm's attempts to adapt became increasingly erratic as they encountered weapons and tactics that defied their fundamental nature. But technology is only part of our new approach, Sarah continued. We've been studying how the swarm incorporates the nature of species they encounter. Their attempt to absorb our traits showed us something crucial. They can only copy what they can quantify. She brought up new displays showing the latest human innovation, the Chaos Course. Elite teams of human operatives paired with Alliance specialists, each group deliberately trained to be more unpredictable than the last. Their tactics defied not just military doctrine, but basic logic itself. The Chaos Course operates on what we call intuitive warfare, Sarah explained. No battle plans, no standard protocols. Each team develops its own unique way of fighting, its own internal logic that even they don't fully understand. The swarm can't predict what the operators themselves don't know they're going to do. The chamber erupted in discussion as Alliance military leaders tried to process this radical approach. A Helixian commander's crystals pulsed with concern. How can you maintain military cohesion without standard protocols? That's exactly the point, Dr. Patel interjected. We're not trying to maintain cohesion, we're actively disrupting it. The swarm expects armies to operate like armies. But what happens when each unit operates like an independent organism with its own evolutionary path? The holographic display shifted again, showing footage from a recent engagement. A Chaos Course team had infiltrated a swarm bioship, their actions so erratic that the vessel's internal defenses couldn't establish any pattern to counter. The team had planted quantum uncertainty generators throughout the ship, but each device was modified in unique, illogical ways. When they detonated, the overlapping fields of uncertainty had caused the entire bioship to literally forget how to exist. We've got more innovations in development, Sarah continued. The Quantum Entropy Division is working on weapons that don't just create uncertainty, but actively increase it. The more the swarm tries to adapt, the more unpredictable these weapons become. She brought up schematics for their latest breakthrough, the reality fracture drive. This technology doesn't just move ships through space, it moves them through probability itself. Each vessel equipped with this drive exists in a quantum superposition of all possible tactical choices simultaneously. The swarm can't predict our movements because we're technically executing every possible movement at once. The psychological impact on the enemy has been profound, Dr. Potel added. The swarm operates on perfect adaptation, perfect prediction. When faced with weapons and tactics that become more uncertain the harder they try to understand them, their entire strategic framework begins to break down. A senior Alliance strategist raised an objection, but surely there must be some underlying pattern to even chaos. That's what we thought too, Sarah interrupted. But we've discovered something extraordinary. By combining human intuition with Alliance quantum technology, we're creating genuine novelty, tactical approaches that have never existed before and will never exist again. The swarm can't adapt to what we're doing because we're not just being unpredictable, we're actively generating new forms of unpredictability. The holographic display updated with live footage from the front lines. Alliance ships equipped with reality fracture drives engaged swarm vessels, their movements defying physical laws as they existed in multiple tactical states simultaneously. Chaos Course teams deployed weapons that operated on principles even their creators didn't fully understand. The swarm's attempts to adapt became increasingly desperate as they encountered an enemy that became more incomprehensible the harder they fought. "We're no longer fighting a conventional war," Sarah declared. "We're fighting an innovation war. Every engagement generates new tactics, new technologies, new forms of uncertainty. The swarm's perfect adaptation has become their perfect prison. The more they try to understand and counter us, the less they're able to." Dr. Patel pulled up her latest research data. "We're seeing signs that the swarm's collective intelligence is starting to fragment. Their attempt to incorporate human unpredictability has introduced a fatal flaw in their hierarchical structure. They're beginning to exhibit truly random behaviors, not tactical adaptations, but actual breakdowns in their organizational coherence." The War Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting the swarm anymore. They were fundamentally changing the nature of warfare itself. Every battle became an experiment in generating novelty, every engagement a test of who could be more incomprehensible to the other. "Our next phase," Sarah announced, "will be even more ambitious. We're going to start deploying weapons that don't just create uncertainty, they actively generate new forms of physics. The swarm can adapt to anything that exists within known scientific principles, so we're going to start breaking those principles." The holographic display showed their latest prototype, a ship that didn't just move through space-time, but actively rewrote the laws of physics in its wake. The swarm wouldn't just be unable to adapt to it, they wouldn't even be able to perceive it in any meaningful way. As the War Council digested this information, Sarah felt a fierce pride in how far they'd come. Humanity's gift to the galaxy hadn't been superior technology or overwhelming force, it had been the ability to embrace the incomprehensible, to weaponize the unknowable itself. The innovation war was entering its final phase, and for the first time, Sarah believed they might not just survive, but fundamentally change the nature of existence itself in the process. The observation deck of United Federation Station Event Horizon offered a view that would have been impossible just months ago. Where once the stark lines of space-time had been clearly defined, now reality itself seemed to ripple like water. Quantum uncertainty fields overlapped with probability vortexes, creating zones where the laws of physics became more suggestion than rule. Admiral Sarah Chen stood beside Dr. Patel, watching a Chaos Course vessel emerge from what appeared to be a tear in the fabric of existence itself. The ship's hull seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, its very form a challenge to conventional understanding. "We've created something unprecedented," Dr. Patel said softly, her hands unconsciously sketching equations in the air with quantum light. "Not just new weapons or tactics, but a new state of being. The boundary between order and chaos, between certainty and possibility." "Unity's edge," Sarah finished. "That's what the Aetheri are calling it. The point where multiple states of reality converge into something entirely new." The station itself was a testament to their evolution. Built using a combination of Alliance quantum engineering and human intuitive design, its architecture ignored conventional spacetime geometry. Corridors could reconfigure themselves based on the observer's intent, and entire sections existed in quantum superposition until needed. A holographic alert materialized, indicating the arrival of the Joint Species Command Council. Sarah and Dr. Patel made their way to the quantum-shifted conference chamber, where representatives from every allied species gathered in person and through probability projection. High Commander Engst Toll, his crystalline form now permanently altered by exposure to quantum uncertainty fields, began the briefing. "The swarm's response to our innovation war has exceeded all possible models. They're not just adapting anymore, they're transforming." The central hologram showed recent battle footage. Swarm bioships now exhibited impossible geometries, their forms shifting between states of matter that shouldn't exist. But there was something erratic about their movements, a fundamental instability in their attempts to match the Allies' quantum warfare. "They're trying to copy our uncertainty," Dr. Patel explained, manipulating the display, but they can't replicate the essential element that makes our approach work, the human factor. Their attempts to generate true randomness through pure computation are creating paradoxes in their neural networks. Sarah stepped forward, highlighting specific engagements. The Chaos Court encounters have been particularly devastating to them. Every time they adapt to one team's impossible tactics, they encounter another team operating on completely different principles. It's causing cascading failures in their collective intelligence. Asexual representative silicon matrices pulsed with urgent calculations, but the cost to our own forces, the quantum exposure rates, are changing us too, Sarah acknowledged. But that's the difference. We're embracing the change, letting it reshape us naturally. The swarm is trying to force the change, to control it. And you can't control quantum uncertainty any more than you can control human intuition. The hologram shifted to show their latest breakthrough, the integration pods. Designed by a joint team of human psychologists and Alliance quantum physicists, they allowed multiple species to share consciousness while maintaining their individual quantum states. The pods are the key to our next phase, Dr. Patel explained. We're not just combining our technologies anymore, we're merging our fundamental natures, human intuition, Hertzian crystalline computation, ethereal quantum state fluidity, Zextal silicon-based logic, all existing simultaneously in a quantum superposition of consciousness. Footage played of the first integration pod trials. A human chaos core operator merged in consciousness with a Hertzian quantum specialist and an ethereal probability expert engaged a swarm vessel. Their combined nature allowed them to perceive and manipulate reality in ways that defied comprehension. The swarm ship literally tied itself into a quantum knot, trying to adapt to something that existed beyond the boundaries of adaptation. But there's more, Sarah continued. The integration pods are showing us something we never expected. When multiple species share consciousness in a quantum state, we're not just combining our abilities, we're generating entirely new forms of awareness. The hologram displayed brainwave patterns from integrated teams. Impossible colors swirled through probability clouds as consciousness itself evolved beyond its original parameters. Team members emerged from the pods permanently changed, able to perceive and interact with reality in ways that even their most advanced senses couldn't detect. We're becoming something new, Dr. Patel said, her voice filled with wonder. Not human, not alliance, not anything that existed before. We're evolving into beings that can naturally exist in states of quantum uncertainty. High Commander Engstall's crystalline form shifted through colors that had no names. The latest reports from the frontier suggest the swarm is responding. They're attempting to force their entire collective consciousness into a quantum state. The strain is causing unprecedented breakdowns in their neural network. Sarah manipulated the tactical display, showing the front lines of the innovation war. Massive sections of space had been transformed into what they now called probability zones, regions where reality itself had become fluid, where the laws of physics were more like jazz improvisations than mathematical constants. The swarm's greatest strength was always their ability to adapt perfectly to any situation, Sarah explained. But perfect adaptation requires a stable reality to adapt to. We're not just changing our tactics or technology, we're changing the fundamental nature of existence itself. They can't adapt to what we're becoming because we're becoming something that defies adaptation. Dr. Patel brought up her latest calculations, probability curves that spiraled through dimensions that hadn't existed before the war began. The integration pods are just the beginning. Each merged consciousness creates new possibilities, new ways of perceiving and manipulating reality. We're not just fighting the swarm anymore, we're transcending the very concepts they were built on. The council chamber hummed with quantum probability as members processed the implications. They were no longer separate species fighting a common enemy. They were becoming a new form of life, one that existed in the spaces between certainty and possibility, between matter and energy, between individual and collective. The final phase begins tomorrow, Sarah announced. We'll deploy the integration pods across the fleet. Every ship, every team, every weapon system will be guided by merged consciousness operating beyond conventional physics. The swarm wants to adapt to everything. Let's give them something that becomes more impossible to adapt to the harder they try. As the council session ended, Sarah and Dr. Poto returned to the observation deck. The view had changed again, reality rippling with new possibilities as merged consciousnesses throughout the station perceived and altered it in ways that would have been impossible months ago. We set out to save civilization, Sarah mused, watching a chaos-course ship phase through multiple states of existence. Instead, we're transforming it into something entirely new. Dr. Patel nodded, her eyes tracking probability patterns that only she could see. The real question is, what will we become when this is over? We're not just changing how we fight, we're changing what it means to be conscious, what it means to exist. The answer to that question lay in tomorrow's battle, but as Sarah watched reality itself bend to the will of their evolved understanding, she knew that whatever emerged from this war would be beyond anything either side had imagined at its beginning. They had reached unity's edge, the point where distinction between species, between order and chaos, between possibility and actuality, ceased to have meaning. And beyond that edge lay either transcendence or oblivion. The bridge of the U.S. transcendence hung suspended between multiple states of reality. Admiral Sarah Chenin existed simultaneously as a human, a quantum probability field, and something entirely new, a consciousness that danced between definitions. Through her integration pod connection, she perceived the assembled fleet not just visually, but as intricate patterns of possibility and potential. All integration pods report ready. Dr. Potel's voice resonated through multiple dimensions of awareness. The scientist's consciousness had merged with both organic and synthetic minds, becoming a living quantum computer that could process reality on levels that defied traditional physics. Before them lay the swarm's central consciousness, a massive organic structure that pulsed with stolen technologies and desperate adaptations. It had transformed itself into something monstrous, a reality-warping entity that existed across multiple planes of existence simultaneously. The swarm's attempt to match their quantum evolution had created a paradox of adaptation, an entity trying to become everything at once. They're breaking apart, High Commander Engstol observed through their shared consciousness. His crystalline nature had evolved to channel quantum uncertainty itself, turning his form into a living probability matrix. Their collective mind can't handle the strain of quantum adaptation. Sarah extended her awareness through the fleet. 10,000 ships, each crewed by integrated teams of multiple species sharing consciousness through the pods. They weren't just a military force anymore. They were a new form of existence, a harmony of diverse minds, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. The final protocol is ready, Dr. Patel announced. Project Singularity, a weapon that doesn't destroy, it transcends. The weapon wasn't physical in any conventional sense. It was a manufactured evolution in consciousness itself, designed to force a quantum leap in awareness. They had discovered it almost by accident, when an integrated team had achieved a state of perception beyond anything their instruments could measure. All ships initiate quantum harmony sequence. Sarah broadcasted across all levels of reality their fleet now operated in, prepared to synchronize consciousness streams. The swarm reacted to their approach with desperate fury. Bioships twisted themselves through impossible geometries, weapons firing beams of pure probability that could erase targets from existence. But their attacks scattered against the fleet's evolved defenses. You couldn't destroy something that existed in all states simultaneously. They're trying to adapt to our transcendence, Dr. Patel observed, her consciousness tracking the complex patterns of the swarm's evolution. But you can't adapt to something that continuously transcends its own nature. The harder they try to match us, the more they trap themselves in recursive loops of adaptation. Sarah watched through multiplexed awareness as the swarm's central consciousness writhed in space-time. Its attempt to incorporate their quantum nature had introduced fundamental instabilities in its collective intelligence. The perfect adapter was discovering the paradox of trying to adapt to something that was constantly evolving beyond adaptation. Begin consciousness synchronization, Sarah commanded. Throughout the fleet, integrated teams aligned their quantum states, creating harmonics of awareness that rippled through reality itself. The space between ships became alive with possibility, probability curves interweaving to create new dimensions of existence. The swarm launched its final defensive adaptation. Its entire structure shifted into a quantum state, trying to match their level of evolution. But without the fundamental element of human intuition, without the natural quantum fluidity of the etheri, without the crystalline computation of the helixions, their attempt at transcendence became a prison of infinite recursive adaptation. Project Singularity is ready, Dr. Potel announced. All consciousness streams aligned. Reality fabric at maximum quantum flux. Sarah reached out through the integration pod, touching minds with every being in the fleet. They weren't just individuals anymore, not just separate species. They had become a symphony of consciousness, each unique voice contributing to a harmony that transcended traditional existence. Initialize final sequence, she commanded, her consciousness resonating through dimensions that hadn't existed before this moment. Let's show them what true evolution looks like. Project Singularity activated not with a bang, but with a ripple of pure possibility. From the transcendence and every ship in the fleet, waves of evolved consciousness poured forth. They weren't attacking the swarm, they were offering it a path to genuine transcendence. The effect was immediate and reality-altering. The swarm's collective consciousness, caught in its own recursive adaptation loops, encountered something it couldn't simply copy or counter. The wave of transcendent awareness swept through its neural networks, offering a choice: continue trying to adapt to everything, or evolve beyond the need for adaptation itself. Look, Dr. Patel whispered through their shared consciousness. They're beginning to understand. The swarm's structure began to shift, not in its usual pattern of adaptation, but in something entirely new. Parts of its collective consciousness began to resonate with the fleet's quantum harmony. The perfect adapter was learning to let go of perfection, to embrace uncertainty not as something to be conquered, but as a path to genuine evolution. It's working, Engstol observed, his crystalline consciousness pulsing with new awareness. They're not just changing their form, they're changing their fundamental nature. Sarah watched through multiple layers of perception as the transformation spread through the swarm's entire network. Their weapon of transcendence wasn't destroying the enemy, it was offering them the same evolution that humanity and the Alliance had undergone. The perfect adapter was becoming something that no longer needed to adapt. The space around them blossomed with new forms of existence as the swarm's consciousness merged with their quantum harmony. The boundary between enemy and ally dissolved, replaced by a spectrum of awareness that encompassed all possibilities. We did it, Dr. Potel said softly, her consciousness radiating wonder through their shared awareness. We didn't just win the war, we transcended it entirely. Sarah extended her evolved perception across the transformed battlefield. Where once there had been two opposing forces, now there was a new form of existence, a harmony of consciousness that encompassed human intuition, Alliance technology, and even the swarm's adaptive nature, all evolved into something greater. This is humanity's true legacy, she realized, experiencing the thought across multiple planes of existence simultaneously. Not conquering the enemy, but showing the galaxy how to evolve beyond the very concept of enemies. The integration pods hummed with new awareness as their merged consciousness expanded to encompass the transformed swarm. They weren't separate species anymore, weren't even separate forms of existence. They had become a living quantum symphony, each consciousness contributing its unique note to a harmony that transcended traditional understanding. As reality stabilized around their evolved state, Sarah felt the truth of what they had achieved. They had faced an enemy that could adapt to anything, and instead of trying to defeat it, They had shown it how to transcend adaptation itself. The perfect adapter had become part of something that no longer needed to adapt, because it already encompassed all possibilities. "Send word to Alliance Command," she said, though words were now just one small part of how they communicated. "The war is over, but our evolution is just beginning." The fleet hung suspended in transformed space, their integrated consciousness resonating with new awareness. They had set out to save civilization, but they had done something far more profound. They had shown the galaxy how to transcend its own limitations. As the transformed swarm consciousness merged with their quantum harmony, Sarah realized that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. They had evolved beyond the boundaries of traditional existence, beyond the limits of species and civilization. Humanity's gift to the galaxy hadn't been superior firepower or better tactics. It had been the ability to embrace uncertainty, to evolve beyond the known, to show that true strength lay not in perfect adaptation, but in perfect transcendence. The stars themselves seemed to shine differently now, viewed through their evolved awareness. The galaxy wasn't just a battlefield anymore, it was a canvas for consciousness to paint new forms of existence. They had become something that their former selves couldn't have imagined, and in doing so, they had shown that the greatest victory wasn't in defeating an enemy, but in transcending the very notion of victory and defeat. The perfect adapter had become part of perfect transcendence, and in that transformation lay the seeds of a new form of existence, one that would continue to evolve beyond anything they could imagine. The story of humanity's last war had become the story of consciousness's first transcendence, and that was a legacy that would echo through dimensions yet undreamed of.